to Divorce Cafe, the podcast where we demystify, detangle and hopefully detox the legal processes that follow a separation with the experts in the relationship property world. We are Shelley Fennell and Tina Henderson. Today we are investigating an international convention that New Zealand adopted way back in the 80s when the fear with international child abductions was that a parent who had lost custody of their child would snatch the child away to a foreign land with another system of law. 40 years later, things have changed, and most of the people forced to return children under the Hague Convention are, in fact, the custodial parent, and most are mothers. Has the convention adapted to this changed dynamic? Could it be causing more harm than it prevents? What happens if there's a good reason to flee?
Okay, today we are lucky enough to have one of Auckland's leading experts on Hague Convention cases, fresh from, this is a mouthful, biannual Hague Convention Convention. He's a very experienced family lawyer with 33 years at the bar and a raft of High Court and Court of Appeal cases to his name. He is a steady hand in all things domestic, although I'm not sure if that applies to doing the dishes, but he is also a holder of a Masters with First Class Honours.
Perhaps the most interesting thing about our today's guest, however, is his 143 character limit. He is a rare being in a field where people love the sound of their own argument, and he's a master of the short and pithy reply. Alex Ashmore, welcome to Divorce Cafe.
Thank you.
And thank you for hosting us here at the lovely Ponsonby Chambers.
Okay, we always like to start with a bit of an icebreaker, so could you please pull one out of the bucket?
Mm-hmm. What do I do with it?
Yep, you can read it out.
If you could be any TV or movie character for real, who would you be? It probably has to be Better Call Saul, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Has to be Saul.
Saul.
Soft spot for Saul.
You sort of identified there.
Yeah, the chaotic practice method. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a cautionary tale, really, isn't he, for all of us?
Well, hopefully Alex isn't.
First season Better Call Saul.
Yes,
Right.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so that we are all up to speed on the topic for discussion today, and I have to be honest, full disclosure, my knowledge is quite limited, maybe to the movies and what I've seen on TV, but can we put you on the spot and ask you to explain what is the Hague Convention and how does it work?
Sure. The Hague Convention is, as it sounds, it's a convention that was formed in The Hague in 1980, and it's then been adopted and ratified by various countries since then. I think New Zealand was about 1990 when we came in, and it's ratified in different ways. In New Zealand, it's ratified by inclusion in a domestic law. So if you look at the Care of Children Act, there's a section, I'll just grab that, subpart 4, and subpart 4 of the Care of Children Act, which runs in sections, I should have prepped this, Alex.
Keeping it real.
Yeah. Basically, it goes from sections 94 down to 124, and that is effectively the Hague Convention, but embedded in our law. So we don't go back to the international documents, we're just going to the Care of Children Act. So that sets out how it works. As I think you said, Tanya, when you came in, is originally it was about non-custodial parents snatching children and running away, but it's evolved over time, so the people that we're coming across in the convention are quite different. The point you made, I think, is accurate. The last probably 10 years, it's mainly custodial parents, but we're seeing changes still on that front. And as we were talking about before, what we're also seeing now is as shared care models become more common in Australasia in particular, it's often a shared care model gone wrong.
So what you mean, so there's not one stay-at-home parent and one working parent?
Exactly. So often it's a shared care. And also we're seeing children moving back and forth between families. So family in Australia, family in New Zealand. A lot of things aren't abductions per se, they're retentions. So in other words, a child is sent for what's supposed to be a 6-month trial that is not returned. And then we had a whole raft of things which hopefully are now historic, which are the COVID cases, where we had people locked down in one country, they went for a week, COVID came, they're here 2 years later. So the convention stays the same, but the facts keep changing and changing. So,
and our courts get to interpret what it means. each time?
Sort of. There's a concept called international comity, which means that the cases internationally are supposed to be the same. In the real world, we actually only look at largely Commonwealth countries, if we're honest. Because they've got similar legal systems. We are influenced a lot by UK decisions and Australian decisions, but it's not a one-way street. A lot of the more recent UK decisions, in many ways, reflect decisions we were making here 10 years ago. So it's not a simple colonial model where we just sit obediently following our English friends. Often they're adopting our ideas, and you get these weird feedback loops where UK decisions reflect older New Zealand cases that then get adopted by New Zealand again, which I think the idea actually came from here 10 years ago. So, but there's a degree of similarity, but yes, the New Zealand jurisprudence is unique.
Okay. I skipped a question too because we've nailed.
So what are the principles that underpin the Hague Convention?
At its hub, if you read the introduction of the Hague Convention and also the Pérez Vera commentary introduction, the core idea behind the Hague Convention is that it's not in children's interest to be abducted, and therefore it's supposed to be deterring abduction, and also the other core principle is supposed to be that it's in the children's best interest to have decisions about them made in their home country. The key point with the convention is, at least in theory, is it's a forum instrument. It's not about what's best for the child, and that's something that people really struggle with because it's so deeply ingrained in us. All decisions about children must do what's best for them. It's not under the Hague Convention.
So can you remind us what does that mean? It's a forum-based decision, not a best interest.
It's not about where the child should live. It's about which court makes the decision about where the child should live. So it's a step before. So, and that's the mantra often, it's saying, look, we don't want to know your custody arguments. People often say, yes, but he's an alcoholic, or but her new boyfriend's a dreadful person, or girlfriend, and often in Hague stuff, the argument will be that just doesn't matter. That's for the home court to work out. We're just here to talk about which court makes the decision, not make the decision itself. And it's a complicated convention in the way that the tests are applied at different places. Do you want a quick rundown of the steps to go through it?
I just got a question there. Does that mean that the child has to be in that country for the court to make the decision?
That's a $50,000 question. I think in practically they do.
Yeah.
I mean, we've sort of growing off piste a bit here a little bit. There have been various trials over the years, and it seems to happen every few years, where they say, why can't we just leave the kid here and we'll have your day-to-day care hearing over there? The problem with that, in my experience, is multiple. One, the hearing is a little bit of a rush job, really, because we're not taking it that seriously. We all know what the outcome we want. So the person in the home country can feel a little bit lack of justice. They think, well, hang on, I'm on the end of a camera, my kid's over there. How does the lawyer for child see the child? Assuming so, you'd assume they'd stay here. So the lawyer for child's not seeing the child. How can the judge meet the child? So that's the first issue. The second problem with that is a lot of the thinking a few years ago was happening. They were fast tracking the domestic hearings, but that of course provides another impetus to run away, because you think if someone comes to your office and says, I want to go to Melbourne, you're going to say, well, file could be a year, but if you just get in a plane and run, you'll get a fast track hearing in 6 weeks, and by the way, you'll be in Melbourne, so they're not going to want to bring you home. So the general understanding is that no, the child has to go back, and you have to have a hearing there, and that raises. There are some intro issues raised by your question as well, the degree to which New Zealand can interfere in the processes in the home country. Can we fast track it? Can we say the child won't be present, or is that actually their decision? Send the kid back and they can decide what to do.
Right.
So
and can you run us through, while we're still in the kind of basic section, can you take us through section 105 and 106, I guess, so the principle and the...
Yeah, the convention is based on a series of steps. The first point to understand is that use of that part of the Care of Children Act is kind of a privilege. And if you're using it, you get fast-track resources, you get best interest of a child coming second. There's all these normal rules that don't apply, so not everybody can get into that section. So to use the section, there's 3 steps. The first thing is jurisdiction. So does the person seeking return have the jurisdiction to order return? Did they qualify to use the convention? And they basically got to prove they had rights of custody, and their rights of custody have been thwarted. In practical terms, what that really means in New Zealand language, are they a guardian? That's really the test. Once you're a guardian, if someone's been taken out of the country without your consent, then yes, you're in, basically.
Do you have to have been exercising your custody rights?
It's interpreted very broadly. I mean, because your custody, it's it's called rights of custody in the language of the convention, but that is not the same as day-to-day care. Rights of custody is probably best understood as I said, guardianship, and guardianship rights are often negatives. The right for the child not to be removed, the child not to change schools. So you're always exercising those rights. So the New Zealand courts have always taken a very broad rule of that. Where it's interesting is people who aren't guardians, whāngai adoptions, grandparents, that sort of stuff. You can have a child been living with his grandmother for 12 years, but she's got no right. And in New Zealand, though these things, they're aging out, there was a period where guardianship of de facto couples was quite blurry. It was all about your name being on the birth certificate and on the right way. And so there were some awful cases where by drilling down at how the birth certificate was registered, they found the guy had no jurisdiction, so goodbye. Those are tracking out now because those are pre-2004, so they're disappearing, those kids. But so that's the first thing, is have they got jurisdiction? And if they've got jurisdiction...
And are they dealing between the right countries, right? New Zealand.
Oh yes, it's further back in than that. It's got to be a Hague country. So it's got to be a Hague country that's been ratified.
Can you remind us of which are the most commonly come across countries that aren't included?
China.
Yeah.
And Middle Eastern countries. Though they're starting, Pakistan has now come in. I think somewhere off the coast of Africa came in last year. They were talking about the conference. So the net's widening. But the big exception from in New Zealand experience is China. That's the big one that we're not seeing.
Okay.
So basically, if it's a Hague country and you've got jurisdiction, the Act says the return must be ordered. There is the court can't look at it and say don't like it. They've got to go back. They can only be returned if two things happen. The first thing, a defence has to be made out. So that's where 106, as you mentioned, comes in, and the defences are set out in that section.
Yeah.
Here's what we did earlier.
Here's what I prepared. No, it's stuck on the back of Shelley's one. Back page. La, 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 la,
it's like a well-oiled machine, isn't it?
There we go.
Yep. So if you look at 106, it spells out the defences there basically, and the defences are that the child is 1 year and settled, so that means at the time of the application they've already been in the runaway country for at least 12 months, and that's a recognition that the convention is supposed to be, it's called a swift response basically, and once the child's been here 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it all gets a bit silly. So if in fact the child was taken out of Australia but you haven't bothered applying for 18 months, that's a defence. Okay,
something to be aware of when you're trying to negotiate for the return, right?
Really important. If you're negotiating for the return and you haven't actually applied to the Hague Convention, keep your eye on the clock, because your colleague may just be stalling to get to the 12-month line.
Boys don't behave like that.
It does. Well, it also raises an interesting issue if you can't find the child. So if in fact you don't know where the kid's gone, and they've run away from a country and they've been hiding. So
you can't make a general...
Not a global one. You've got to know which country they're in. And that's, there's a whole area of law on that, which is very interesting as well. But so that's the first defence. Then there's the rights of custody defence, was a person who wasn't actually exercising rights of custody, but that's not used very often. But more importantly, is consented or acquiesced to the removal. Now that's a very important one for a runaway parent, well, for the parent who's left behind, because you can get this awful situation where the person ups the child and goes, they go back to the home country, the person who's left behind doesn't know any of their legal rights, is terrified, often if they're a migrant as well, feel disempowered. The person gets on the phone and says, right, here's the deal, you let me stay in New Zealand and I'll let the child come home to Christmas, every Christmas, see you. If you don't, you'll never see your son again. And the person goes, okay. And there's a lot of interesting jurisprudence about, is that actually acquiescence? Is it a magic word that if you say okay, ka-ching, or do you have to have legal advice as to actually what your rights were? And consent's a similar interesting point. If someone doesn't really think they had a choice, and you can get interesting cases there with dynamics in the relationship, where the person feels overwhelmed and overpowered. I'm doing this, okay, and they go okay, or she goes okay.
Yeah, that's where that enthusiastic consent should always be the rule for when it comes to consent. Yep.
Then we have the grave risk, which is the fashion of the day. Grave risk the grave risk would result in intolerable circumstances. Maybe we can discuss that later. There's been a huge rise in those. That's probably the biggest trend we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, is the rise in grave risk cases, or 5 years.
And the actual physical violence one?
Yep. That's it's basically the grave risk is a place the child in physical or psychological harm, or would place the child in an intolerable situation. So basically it's a broad spectrum, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Then there's the child objection defence, which is a very interesting one. So if the child says, I don't want And that is again, it's not written down anywhere. Generally, the child's got to be at least 8, otherwise that's not going to fly. And we get into the need for psychological evidence at that point as to the need for return, what's the influence on it. And as often said, is the child objecting to return to the country or return to the parent? Do they understand they're not going back to live with mum, they're actually going to go back to Australia in general? It's very issue.
And at some stages, children can be assumed to know what's best for them, and at other stages, not.
Well, and the argument at Hague Convention is, why does the child get to choose as well? The parents don't. So that's an interesting point. And the final issue, which is, as far as I'm aware, has never been raised in New Zealand, which is the 1061E, which is it's a breach of a child's fundamental rights permitted under New Zealand law. Now, that's almost always been ignored. Without being disrespectful to anyone who's listening, it's often raised by people who are a little bit on the edge, but there's been a growing discussion.
Just wrote it down so I can use it somewhere.
Well, there's a growing discussion that actually things like tikanga, we haven't looked at that too closely, and that's
You're right not to be separated from your cultural heritage, sort of thing.
And I think that's
You heard it
watch
here
the
first.
space. Yep, no, I
Yeah.
think that's an interesting point. So those are defences. So
And then the discretion.
that's well
Sorry.
ahead of me. So that's right. So the person has to make out jurisdiction. If they make out jurisdiction, the person who's left with the child has to make out a defence. If you don't fall into one of those 5 categories, there's mandatory return. The court has no choice. So you can't just say in general, yeah, I don't have any of these defences technically, but actually it's best for the child to stay here for the following reasons. The school is better, and my mother lives here, and my father lives there, and he really likes mountain biking. Nah, doesn't cut it. So you've got to get home on a defence. Then and only then do we move to the discretion stage. So if you make out a defence, it doesn't automatically follow the child stays. The court may refuse to order return, may. And that's a very important point. And that's the discretion stages where a lot of the jurisprudence is about. And the discretion is generally under sort of a balancing act between, on the one hand, what's best for this individual child, and on the other hand, the general principles of the convention, which is to prevent abduction. And it's been balancing those two factors. There's a lot of debate at the High Court level as to whether that's correct or not, and there is an argument that there's now contrary views between the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal on that point. That's for another day, probably beyond what you're talking about here. But it's an interesting act. And there was a time, again, these things have changed, there was a time where you just could never resist return, because even if you got home on the defence, the judges inevitably nailed you at discretion point, and that is changing, that's altering. It's now generally accepted if you can prove grave risk, it's a no-brainer. The discretion will always favour staying here. You're never going to order child back if you found it's grave risk.
And we're going to talk about a specific case on that, aren't we?
But if the defence is, say, child objection, it's pretty hard to beat the discretion in the absence of any other factors, because the court will say, I get it, you don't want to go back, but sorry, babe, here's the convention principles. But the key point to make, if you're acting for the person who's come to New Zealand, you've got to get through all those gates. Defence alone doesn't make it, and never underestimate the importance of discretion stage. That's often really where the battleground is.
Because one of the things the court's balancing up is the best interest of other children not to be abducted, right?
That's exactly the point. I mean, one of the unique features of Hague jurisprudence and the convention is domestic stuff is what's I think called individualised consequentialism. So in other words, it's what's best for this particular child, but it doesn't take into account other kids. Not even often even step siblings. You can say it's dreadful for that child over there, but it's good for you. Convention's actually a general consequentialist. So you can say, and there's cases about tears before bedtime regarding children saying, sorry, it's going to hurt you, but there's a whole lot of other children who aren't going to be abducted because of this case, and so we're going to put their needs ahead of the others. So that's again a different strand to that jurisprudence we don't normally get.
Yeah, that could be quite a harsh pill to swallow, as a
Take
parent.
one for the team.
Yeah.
Well, it's not part of our normal
We don't do
child
that
practice.
to adults, right? Better that 10 innocent guys go free than 10 guilty guys go free than one innocent man goes to jail. Okay. How do you bring a Hague Convention case, and how do you defend one logistically?
Surprisingly, we're surprised how many lawyers don't know the answer to that question. It baffles me. A lot of them don't.
Me too.
Bringing one is really easy. So if you're in New Zealand, someone has taken your child out of New Zealand without your consent, you call the central authority in Wellington. The central authority in Wellington leap into action. They'll assign a lawyer for you. That lawyer will assess the value of the case. If they think, yes, it's got legs, that lawyer will file the application for you.
So that's the first bar, yeah?
That's
you've got to
the
get
first
through
bar.
them.
I mean, they're on your side. They're not
Right.
trying to filter you out. I mean, they want to take the case. They're fun. But if it's a dog, you'll say sorry. This is not got no. You've got no jurisdiction, or it's just they've got an amazing grave risk defence, or whatever. So, so that's the first thing. So that person will assess it. If it's a go, they will then tell us, the central authority say, okay, off you go. That lawyer works with you drafting the papers. So you file an application, an affidavit applicable law. That goes down to Wellington, and if the child's been taken to Australia, it goes from Wellington to Canberra,
So that's
then to the state.
The lawyer, so the person goes to a lawyer, their lawyer goes to the central authority.
You don't need your lawyer.
Okay,
Sorry,
so the
lawyers,
central
you
lawyer,
don't need it.
the central authority appoint
You
a lawyer.
telephone the central authority, and you could by all means use your lawyer, but your lawyer's going to do nothing more than give you a phone number.
Right.
And that lawyer, the central authority allocates for you as free. There's no charge. But they will then be the liaison person between the central authority in Australia who runs the case. If the child comes over here, we get the reverse procedure. So the way it works, if you're acting with the central authority, the Canberra will call Wellington will call you and tell you to file in court. So we file papers in court.
And that one, you do have to get your own lawyer, and you have to pay for your own lawyer.
Well, nearly. This is where the person's in Australia. So if the person's in Australia, they'll instruct your central authority will file. If you're the person who's come to New Zealand with the child, you're on your own. So you do need to instruct a lawyer. You can get legal aid, but it's just the same test as everybody else. And that's one of, to be fair, the injustices in the system is that the person who's left behind gets a free service and a good service because they're good lawyers, whereas the person who's run away is often scrambling around trying to find.
I saw a
someone to do it.
statistic in one of the articles about it saying that New Zealand had spent 688,000 on Hague Convention cases. This is in 2020, right? So we're 3 years out of date, but 688,000 on defending or on Hague Convention cases. Most of that going on one case at that stage, which is the case that we're going to talk about.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Which is that's a lot
That
of
would have
money,
been
right?
experts presumably as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, that's how you bring them basically.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Okay, what are the? I think you have covered a little bit.
I think.
Should we miss that one out?
Yeah.
Okay. Should we do the recent statistics?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
Do you have any recent statistics on the percentage of decisions that result in the return of children to New Zealand?
This is one of the succinct answers you guys really like knowing. So
And no feeling about it.
it's probably what you said was pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Actually.
So I did in my Googling. There was some research done by a young woman, I think in Otago, I believe it was. I hope I'm not doing her discredit. That was saying that in 2017, at the time she wrote the article, 68% of applications related to the primary caregiver, or actions of the primary caregiver, and of those, 72% were the mother.
Right.
So that's, but not in terms of how many people get returned. Would your feeling be that most decisions result in return, or is it
70, 75?
Yeah.
That's
That's
very
the purpose,
gut.
right?
That's
fast and brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm quite interested. This is going totally off piece, but then presumably they have another hearing about the actual custody. And
In theory.
In theory. And so, do they ever bring them back, meet all those requirements,
Let's
and then
skip
say
ahead to-
it's in the best interest of the child they go back?
Yeah, happens all the time.
It does happen. all the time.
I don't practice in those countries, but
Yeah.
I can think of several cases in the last few years where people have been hagged back to New Zealand, applied for relocation, got relocation, gone.
Right.
So that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
It raises interesting issues because I don't know the stats on this, but a lot of these people just don't have the resources. It's all well and good saying run your full case, but they can't.
Yeah.
Often they don't go back themselves. They'll stay in New Zealand. That's a common thing. Not
Right.
terribly common, but it does happen.
Yeah, so are we ready, or is it time for an international court, sort of Star Wars style, where there can be hearings on the actual merits of the case rather than having this
Your
Hague?
conspiracy theory listeners are going to be going nuts at this point.
Really?
It could
Why?
be run by the UN. Yep,
Right.
that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a nice idea, but I mean, which law does it follow?
But you could still do it on the basis of the law of the country of habitual residence, couldn't you?
You could.
But everybody wouldn't have to travel, like you were saying earlier, and you just make sure that you get
How
all
do
the
you-
evidence,
how do you
you
appear?
cross-examine your peer audio-visually. We
Okay.
all did it during
Yeah.
COVID.
Yep, possibly.
I could imagine all those Star Wars characters, appearing,
Okay, that's
discussing.
fine. That'll be fun.
No?
We'll all fly to
Okay.
Paris. Yep. I think it's good. I think the political level is quite high. I think the buy into that would require an enormous amount of investment of time and money. And on a certain level, it also undermines the convention, because the argument would be, are you saying every location case is heard in that court, or just Hague ones?
Well, I don't know.
So this is a
If
special-
it worked in Hague, I suppose then, but it's mainly going to apply in Hague Convention cases, right? Because
So if you want access to the
parties are in
special
two
court, you've got to
different
run
countries.
away.
Yeah, if you've got a cross-border issue
Yeah.
with custody, you can apply to this
Yeah.
court.
Yeah, give it a go. The only thing, as I said, because I'm old school Hague, just you've got to be careful about any solution that incentivises running.
Yeah.
That means that you get something, you get access to the
Yeah.
special Star Wars court, you get access to the
Yeah.
special funding, and that's the trouble. I mean, without being too brutal, and this is on both sides of the coin, there's a little bit of a myth that the people who flee countries are these frightened little rabbits who don't have any understanding of the jurisprudence, and they just run in their bare feet to the plane, and
And
then
of course there will be some like that.
there'll be some. There's also a hell of a lot who've called their lawyers.
Calculating, right.
There'll be a rare Hague lawyer who doesn't get a call a month from someone overseas saying,
Yeah.
how do I do this?
And if,
So-
we could skip ahead to my question, which is, what advice do you give people to avoid Hague Convention issues? If you're overseas right now, picking up the pieces after a separation, far from family, no connections over there, maybe no connection to the country you're living in, what advice do you give that person
If they want to leave.
if they want to come home to family?
Telling you all our secrets now. The first thing is,
Socialising legal advice.
since we are using television analogies, there's a wonderful line from The Wire which says, if you shoot at the king, you better not miss. And it's a bit like that.
Omar?
Omar, that's exactly right. So if you don't just give it a go, because if you give it a go and get returned, you've lost a lot of mana, you've lost a lot of money, you've got a pissed off home court who doesn't like you.
So assuming you don't want to, assuming that you want to do the best thing, what's the best?
Well, you assess, have you got a chance? It sounds awful, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But so just think
Have you
carefully
got a
about
chance
it.
of winning a Hague
If you've got a
return?
chance of winning a Hague
Right.
return, if you don't have a chance of winning a Hague return, what are you achieving here? Now, you might occasionally, people don't lodge. Occasionally, the left behind person just thinks, what am I going to win? If I win, I'll get back this angry person with the angry children, I'll just let it go. So that does happen. But the flip side is, if your partner, the left behind person, is aggressive and they do pursue it, you're worse off. So that's the big question really, is it worth playing this game, or are you better to invest your money in your case back there? And that's what we often say that to clients is, look, you've got finite resources, you're going to burn $20,000 in 2 horrible months on a Hague Convention case. Do it over there. Just get a lawyer and file.
And
get on
is
with it.
have you come across a satisfactory arrangement for parents to live in different countries?
Sharing a child.
Yeah.
That's not a Hague question. It's
I
a
know.
family law question.
Yeah, you're a family.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of people do that. It's
Yeah.
a very common
But
situation.
yeah,
I mean,
what?
one-
Because a lot of them seem pretty unpalatable.
the child's got to live in one.
Christmas.
Exactly, the child's got to live in one place. Is the reality of it. I mean, once they
Yeah.
hit school age, the classic one, is the person in the other country has disproportionate amount of the holidays, so they get more of the holidays.
Yeah.
Depends where they are. Like if they're in Sydney, actually
That's
Sydney
not so
is
hard.
not that far away, further away than Christchurch, really. So
Yeah,
it's not
easier
that hard
fly
to do it.
than Napier at the moment.
That's right, yeah. But if they live in Bahrain, it's going to be a real nightmare. So that's the issue, really. Overseas is a big place.
And the judges are making orders about audio-visual contact. There used to always be regular telephone contact. I remember there used to be provisions. Here's a phone card,
That's right.
so that the child. That's in.
Unfortunately, and I don't know if it's your experience, again, this isn't a Hague, it's just a family law, a lot of that stuff depends on the attitude of the parents. So if both parents are on deck and are supportive of, hey, no, you can't go to Jamie's, just wait, Dad's calling or Mum's calling, or but if they're going to sit and say, she's just gone out, I'm not going to disturb her, I'm not going to, and vice versa. And it's not a gender thing or anything, it's just,
No.
but that is an issue, I think. That's probably the same as any parenting arrangement,
Yeah,
actually.
and
The
that's-
success or otherwise, it largely depends on the degree to
Yeah,
which the parents are bought into it.
And
But-
that's where a good lawyer can come in, and a good lawyer, perhaps, I don't know, advises their client, here's what's going to serve your best interest in the long term, make an effort to this, because clients are really influenced by what their lawyer tells them, aren't they?
Oh, and there's a lot to
Are they?
Yeah, sometimes. The good ones are.
Only if they like it.
And it's not always about winning. I mean, we've all seen that. You can fight you can win the battle and lose the war. So you can successfully resist the relocation and then have this angry ex-partner who,
And child.
Yeah, often it's a difficult one. You shouldn't pander to your ex on the one hand. On the other hand, you shouldn't aggravate your ex.
Yeah.
So it's just a case of finding the happy medium.
Find a lawyer who's been in practice for 33 years and ask them what the best thing to do
Yeah,
is.
possibly.
Yeah. Okay. We love a good case. Everybody likes a good story, and when you're with a Hague Convention expert, that's the best time to talk about a case. I discovered, and you've been talking about, a case of LRR and Cole, C-O-L, sorry, not Cole. That was, the most recent decision was in 2020 in the Court of Appeal. It's a really interesting case, I think, because it really put the convention and its purposes and the underlying presumptions to the test. So I'll just give a quick bullet point on what the facts were in that case, catch everybody up, and then maybe you can tell us about how that went through the courts. So it's a case that went to the Court of Appeal after one parent, a Kiwi, fled from a women's refuge in Australia back to her parents in New Zealand with the party's 2.5-year-old child. The parents had what the court described as a dysfunctional relationship. Both parents had issues with alcohol abuse. I think that was accepted in Australia, and were methamphetamine users. There had been multiple police interventions during their relationship and family violence orders made by police, I think it was, in Australia. And when the mother fled, the other party was facing charges of assault, breach of protection orders and bail conditions. She left in 2017, and violence was found to have escalated that year. The evidence presented at the initial hearing pointed to the mother having suffered depression and having made several suicide attempts as a result of the violence and dysfunction. On her return to New Zealand, things started picking up for her. She was supported by her family. She got herself cleaned up, went to AA meetings, got a part-time job, and apparently made a good job of looking after the child. The father applied to enforce his rights under the Hague Convention and returned the 2.5-year-old to Australia to have arrangements determined. He denied the violence and said the mother was the violent one. Now, in the family court, the judge said it would result in a grave risk of the child being returned to an intolerable situation to return them to Australia, and also that it would expose them to a grave risk of physical and psychological harm. But in the High Court, it was a different story. What happened in the High Court?
Well, it was a more traditional approach was taken.
Yeah.
So from memory, I haven't got the High Court case in front of me, but from memory what happened was they went back to some of the more traditional models that they could rely upon Australian social services for support,
Yep.
etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, judge.
So I didn't make one of those defences.
No, they failed.
Yeah, the judge said that, failed on that. And if I can just read a couple of the things that it was Judge France, maybe that should be Justice France in the High Court, now retiring, I see. So he made the decision that no, the family court was wrong, the child should go back. And some of his statements, I think it makes it really clear how a judicial discretion, how that kind of plays into things, and a person's own personal belief system, but it might be more about the evidence that was before him. So he says the core situation, he said that the child wouldn't be at risk anymore. So there was pretty clear evidence of violence in Australia. And the judge said, yeah, but that was when they were living together. There's no evidence of what would happen if they weren't living together. They've separated now. So he said the core situation which lies behind the bulk of the previous misconduct by both parties will not exist. There's no history of how matters will work out once they separate. So that's one thing which is, interesting. Then he says, if the mother cannot herself tolerate the situation, there's no evidence to say the father cannot care for the child. The primary risks are to her, not H. Which, I'm glad that I've read the Court of Appeal decision, and spoiler alert, it gets a bit happier there. And the last thing, which made me a bit worried about where he was coming from, without minimising the stresses on the mother and recognising her perception of the situation and the risk the father presents. And I consider the circumstances fall well short of establishing an intolerable situation for age. Now, something changed in the Court of Appeal, and that was partly around what the psychologist reports. Can you tell us what happened in the Court of Appeal?
I don't know. I haven't followed it too
Right,
closely
yeah.
at all, so you
Also,
can do it.
yeah, and
Basically,
nerdily I got
much further evidence was
fascinated.
filed, is my understanding.
Yeah. So I think others had the same reaction as me. That I would have thought that the mother being suicidal and the actual violence and history of violence and dysfunction might have. Yeah, that you'd be
More of
expected that they would have an effect on the child. Yeah. So, and that is what happened in the Court of Appeal. So, the mother got leave to introduce a whole lot more evidence. There were more psychologists brought in, and they talked about yes, there's a very real risk to a child who's returned to or brought up in a situation where the mother is at risk of psychological violence, that there'd been breaches of protection orders so that Australia couldn't guarantee her safety. In that case, it was also relevant that Australia is pretty crappy to New Zealand citizens, right? So she couldn't be guaranteed to get legal aid and other housing support and things. So her situation is going to be pretty precarious. A precarious situation because of violence and financial stuff for a mum is precarious for the child, and the Court of Appeal said, which seemed like a big deal at the time in 2020, child doesn't have to go back. But there's been some developments in that case more recently we'll maybe get on to. I guess if there's a question in all of that, it is speed is at the heart of these hearings, and timeframes are short. In that case, LRR, did it have an effect on the outcome at the different levels, because there's no ability to cross-examine and limited time to produce reports to help judges assess risk?
That's exactly what happened. I think, there's a couple of issues really. I mean, the first thing is the importance of LRR itself, the Court of Appeal case, which we probably should talk about, because there's a lot of chatter about it. And
what was the chatter?
Well, there's chatter about it on multiple levels. There was schools of thought that were saying this has changed everything. No one's ever going back again. Hague Convention has effectively been overturned by the Court of Appeal. Some groups are going hurrah, other groups are saying disaster. But this is it. Everything changes now. There were other groups saying that the New Zealand will become a laughingstock internationally. We're following a path which no one's ever been down before, etc. And I think a lot of the reactions to LRR were over the top.
Right.
And if you actually read the decision and see what they say and just go through the jurisprudence in it, it's not quite as radical as it's said. And what they're now just talking about it is evolution, not revolution. So it clearly was a step. I mean, the judge itself says, especially in the more recent case, they seem to saying actually it was a big step. LRR, they seem to say it wasn't a big step, though they did take a so. But anyway, so it was a change, but it was more a consolidation, I think is a better way to understand it. Do you want a bit of background on that, or what I'm talking about? Okay, so basically, as I said before, historically, getting home in a grave risk defence was almost impossible. And this is because New Zealand adopted what was called a narrow approach, and there was a series of presumptions that we put in play that actually weren't in any legislation, but we just adopted them, that meant it was tautological, you couldn't do it. So, for instance, the assumption would always be that the home country, because New Zealand had ratified the convention with the other country, this means the New Zealand government had looked carefully at the other country's entire social system. They had satisfied themselves that they're magnificent, they could handle returns, therefore you could assume, in this case Australia, had the tools to make it there. And if you follow that through, you're never going to bloody run a Hague risk. You couldn't do it, because the child would never be in intolerable circumstance, because the act of ratification implies there will never be an intolerable circumstance. So that was the first problem. The second problem, which is one of my obsessions, is there was an argument which was referred to as coach and four. And this coach and four. And this comes from an argument, a line from an English case way back in the 90s, I think, where they said that if you allowed the impact of a parent's bad behaviour on the grave risk, that would drive a coach and four through the convention, and therefore we can't do that. And the argument, the classic, So the classic case is a woman, she's a sole carer of a 10-week-old baby, she runs away from Australia to New Zealand, she says, I'm not going back, do what you want, I'm not going back. And they say, well, you can't take a 10-week away from a primary caregiver, that's insane, that's intolerable. And the coach in 4 argument said, you can't even take it into account. Missy, you can't come along here and create a situation you're relying on.
Benefit from your wrong.
And that for years was a part of that. So the combination of those factors meant grave risk was almost impossible to run. But over the years, those assumptions began to get eroded. For instance, the idea that Australia, so there was Australia, so the idea that Australia had its magical social system was questioned in many cases. And there's a case with Coates and Bowden I was involved in about 20 years ago, where we very similar facts to LRR, and we proceeded the High Court, well, the court was decided in the High Court that it doesn't matter what you did, this woman could not be safe going back. She was so damaged by her environment. You could have the most well-meaning social system in the world. The act of landing in Sydney Airport is going to trigger everybody. There was very extreme facts, but so is LRR, quite extreme facts. So those are the point I'm making. These weren't new ideas, they were bubbling around. And the idea also that you couldn't, the coach in 4 thing was misguided, was also taken into account in English decisions. So what LRR did is it brought on board and consolidated these arguments. And
it's not so black and white.
It's not so black and white. And if you look at, let's grab the decision.
Which one you after? LRR?
Oh, here it is here. Basically, for the lawyers out there, there is paragraphs 86 of the decision through to 96 set out what's called the 8 points, and people talk about the 8 points, and that's what LRR does, and that's really the nub of LRR. But the 8 points aren't new, they're not radical, but what they do is bring all together in one place, in one decision at a higher appellate level, principles that were scattered through dozens of cases. And I think they've put to bed at last this whole narrow interpretation argument of grave risks. So what they're saying is that you can't assume that the home country will be safe. You can't not look at evidence because you think mum's naughty, so I'm not looking at it. There will be returns sometimes, etc., etc. So they're not new ideas, but they were put in the same place. But I think the central part of LRR is its statement that though it's a swift procedure and though we're moving fast, we're still a court and we still need evidence. And so just as you can't just say, I assume Australia is safe, you need evidence, you also can't say, I'll be at risk without evidence. And that leads us into the next Court of Appeal decision, if you want to raise that, which is
Roberts
decision.
and Creswell.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, tell us about that. So you've just come back from the convention. You described this one as a hot
topic, yeah.
Came out the end of February.
So basically this is a new Court of Appeal case. It's got one similar judge to LRR, and in some ways it's almost LRR2 from my perspective.
Without the P.
Without the P. Opposite result. So in the Creswell decision, the High Court had said, no, you can stay, grave risk of intolerable harm. Court of Appeal said, nah. Don't think so, back you go. So the children were sent back to France in this decision.
Yeah.
And the interesting point is it's similar to LRR, because just as in LRR, the High Court had much more expert opinion than the High Court did. In Creswell, they had far more expert opinion than the lower court, because in this case, the central authority brought in their own experts at the higher, or the left behind parent brought stuff in at the higher level.
And that was evidence about what the situation would be like back in the home.
Two things. So the first thing is that you actually had an order from the French court by the time you got to the Court of Appeal. Yep. So you actually could say what it was going to look like. So people weren't speculating the French might do this, the French might do that, this is what the French are going to do. Secondly, you had expert psychological evidence countering the expert psychological evidence of the mother. So you had 2 psychologists disagreeing with each other, which hadn't happened further down.
And again, that's that thing between speed and promptness and a good decision.
Yep. And this is the balancing act. All of these cases, just the nature of the process, they're taking months to go through the system. I think 1 to 2 years is quite common.
For a Hague Convention?
Yep.
Yeah, and what is the rule? It's done and dusted in 6 weeks, or I want to know why.
A reporting letter teacher, yeah, exactly. So this is what you spoke of before, the tension between this need to move quickly and the need for experts. But I think the main takeout you should take from the more recent appellate cases are, it's not as simple as get on the plane, but it's also not amateur hour. You're going to need to come to court with proper evidence, and both sides do. the central authorities can't just sit there and say Australia's great, thank you. They've got to produce evidence of challenge. The person who's trying to resist return can't just turn up and say I'm frightened. You need to be bit more advanced.
So what
than
was
that.
the difference between this case and the other case? Because this is the opposite
facts
decision. And so what do you think are the critical facts in that case?
The expert evidence.
And so was that they would be safe in France?
Not that it's safe, it's just that it wasn't as bad as you said, that you're
wasn't
not going to melt
intolerable.
down as bad as you're going to say.
There was less evidence of violent, like because he didn't have the alcoholism, the methamphetamine, like the LRR was quite an extreme case.
Yeah.
Women's refuges, the Creswell decision, they were living, I don't know if it's unfair to say, but they were living in a chateau part of the time, and...
So not so intolerable.
It's not. You don't want to belittle the woman's experience.
No.
I don't know what she went through, but I mean, this is the point we'd have to remember with LRR. It was extreme. You know, it was horrific. It was there was violence. There was crime. I think there was drug addiction. It just was not good.
Punches in the face. Yeah. And in the Creswell one as well. So you had that first family court level order saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Mum's in New Zealand, Dad's in France. Mum can have them the holidays, Dad can have them the rest of the time. So there was a decision which I think that actually helped with those first decisions that you don't have to return because that's too far away. But then the father then applied to amend that decision, didn't he? So that at the end of the day, the courts then said, okay, well, if Mum comes back, they can have shared custody. So some of the intolerable conditions, part of the intolerable condition was Mum's not going to have the children for 44 weeks of the year. And once it was varied a little bit, it was less intolerable and they were able to,
And I guess that goes with all those principles that you were saying at the beginning, which is it has to be pretty drastic before you don't conform to the Hague Convention because you're trying to stop child abduction. So it has to be this real extreme case with some facts.
It has to be extreme, but not so extreme as to never happen in the real world. Does that make sense? That's probably the thing, and I think that's where we were erring before. Through a series of quite logical and appealing individual propositions, all added together, meant the fences just weren't happening. It couldn't be done. And I think that is what has changed. We've unpacked some of those old 80s, 90s models. The LR has put them to bed, and now
it's showing that it's we're not going crazy here. No. We're being reasonable. In this circumstance, you're still going
and that's
back.
why I think those two cases are quite important
because
they balance each other out.
There was no reasonable solution in the first case, and there is a reasonable solution in the second case.
Intolerable is a big word.
Yeah,
as well.
Is. Unable to tolerate.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we talked about what had happened since then.
Yep.
Did you want to go?
Yeah. So this is a question from a friend, as you'll tell from the wording of it. Family court judges in New Zealand making decisions about children have the statutory mantra that the welfare and best interests of the child are paramount. You haven't had this question before.
I know. What the hell is
Sorry.
this?
The convention puts a gloss.
My support person.
The convention puts a gloss on that paradigm. Short of palpable harm, the welfare and best interests of the child are as judged in the courts of the country of habitual residence. It's the underlying principle, right? Do you think the removal of the welfare and best interests test until the child is back in the country of habitual residence was justified? But anyway, don't answer. In the sense of the certainty it provided, did it work? And is it fair to say that the near certainties which the Convention sought have been lost to the vagaries of judicial discretion? Probably just answer the last
three
part.
questions.
Ask the last bit.
Well, the first question is really simple. It's a political question. Doesn't
Is
actually.
it?
Well, yeah, the politicians changed the act. We didn't. So it's what it says. So yes, the amendments.
So is that talking about a change in our code?
Subpart 4 changes the Care of Children Act. Until Subpart 4 was put in, all questions about children were about best interest. The insertion of the Hague Convention has changed that, and it says what it says.
Yeah, and that's something. How would you paraphrase that? It says that Section 4(1), which says the children's best interest should be paramount, doesn't override the bit from the. Doesn't apply. Right.
Well, it does sort of apply. It applies at discretion stage, but no, that's right. It's a whole different set of rules. That's what I said at the beginning. First question is, can you use Subpart 4? Because it's a pretty snazzy little section. It's a part of it. So the first issue is political. That's what the Parliament said. That's what we're stuck with. The vagaries thing. Can you say that one again?
Yeah. Is it fair to say that the near certainties which the Convention sought have been lost to the vagaries of judicial discretion.
No, I think that's harsh. I think,
especially with this case,
it's just more
bring it
nuanced.
back
It's just more subtle, I
Mm.
think. And I think one of the problems that was happening before, that I think where we briefly talked about, is a lot of these sharp lines saying it's not returned to the country, it's not returned to the parent, returned to the country, it's for the home country to decide the case, it's not about the case. Life's not that simple. Things blur into each other. So the effect of on the primary parent, the effect of the primary parent of the process, the effect of violence on the primary parent. We did ring fence off things too much before. It was a baby returning machine before, and it's not now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, when a decision is made to return children, what happens next, and what is the process for determining contact and the ability?
Appeal. It depends where you are. If you're at the family court, you've got a right to appeal, but you don't appeal for fun. If there's nowhere to go, you'll simply
I was thinking
say...
when they get
once
sent
it's
back,
definitely-
this is Shelley's earlier one, once the kid is returned to the country, what's the process then?
Well, maybe we'll take a step back before that even. So let's say they're going back. So the process is effectively, it moves very quickly. That's the first point to understand. It's often within a week or so. So you'll have consent, they'll fly back on a certain flight. If the parent is going back, they'll go back with them.
Who pays for that flight?
You do. The parent does. The parent can... The one who's run away doesn't have to go back. There's no jurisdiction to force them to go back. So they can simply say, do what you want, I'm not playing. In that case, normally the left behind parent will have to come over, or associate pick the children up. Dangerous going to play though, because they've got the kids now. So and you often discuss that with your clients who are having a little meltdown. You say, well look, it's your choice, but just, long game. And
doesn't look good at the next call.
Well, they often will say to you, it won't last 5 minutes, blah, 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 it'll fall apart. And you just, okay, be careful. But it doesn't, you've got a problem. So anyway, normally what happens is the person who's left will go back. It happens quite quickly. Now, in theory, the second they walk through those green doors at the airport, it's no concern of us anymore. So it then becomes a domestic problem back in Australia. We are increasingly getting negotiated returns. So that's what happened, where you can often have a mediation with the person.
After an order's made.
Or if you're going to give up, or if you think there's no chance of success, you might say, look, this is a dog, let's negotiate here. And so often that'll dovetail into orders over there being registered or that sort of stuff. It's a bit complicated because you can't make parenting orders while the Hague's in place. So you often get into this little game, which I've done before, where you order a return, you close the file, then you make a domestic application, which then gets registered in Australia. That sort of dance, because you can't do them contemporaneously. But it's basically a domestic question. What happened? There's no special Hague result. They just become a domestic argument.
So then you're applying for access, and if you can't agree,
or
access,
day-to-day care or whatever it is, whatever you want to do.
And the judge works it out.
And relocation possibly at the same time.
And that judge doesn't even have to look at the Hague Convention or any of those defences.
Evidence is evidence. So I mean, it's like just general practice, isn't it? If you know your client's been involved in litigation elsewhere on similar facts, you want to read what they've said because there's only one truth.
And I guess if one party's saying you're going to abscond, I can't trust you with this, whatever it is. I guess there's always putting the passports at the lawyer's office or whatever.
Yep, OPRs,
like
that sort of stuff. Yep.
What's an OPR?
Order printing removal. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that struck me was just because you go and live in another country doesn't mean that you think its legal system is a great one for dealing with children. What if the parties have got a limited connection to the country of habitual residence? Does anything change?
You've either got habitual residence or not. So you might have cases where you say they're not habitually resident. I mean, habitual residence is a whole other podcast. I mean, it's really interesting. The central point with habitual residence, from my perspective, is people often see it as a question about which country's habitual residence. Is it New Zealand or is it Australia? Is it Germany? Is it France? That's not the question. The question is France habitual residence? Yes, no. Because you can have no habitual residence. There's no rule that says you must have one. You can have a gypsy lifestyle where you just move around. Well, the country will have its own jurisdiction. You just won't be able to use the Hague Convention. You know, you can imagine a situation where the family just sloshes around. You spend 2 weeks in Thailand, then you spend 4 weeks here. I don't know, you sell jewellery or you have
so you just need to be careful where you go and live, because
that's the bottom line.
You're choosing the jurisdiction.
Once you're actually there.
Presumably you can agree jurisdiction.
No.
You can't agree.
It's a question of fact.
Not if you no longer don't agree.
No, you often see those parenting orders in New Zealand and the parents agree habitual residence will be New Zealand. Totally meaningless. It's a question of fact. Parental intention is a factor. It's a thing. Yeah. But you can't contract out of it. It's not like you can't sign a contract saying we agree it's best for little Jane to live with me 3 weeks, you 4 weeks. The judge isn't bound by that.
They might go to acquiescence.
Yes.
Or consent. Yeah. Awesome. Shelley?
Uh,
Question
what-
13.
Question 13. Lucky 13.
It's a crowd pleaser.
What is the 1996 Hague Convention on Parental Responsibility and Protection of Children, and should we have signed and ratified it by now? How many years later? 27?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's a convention that's often seen as an adjunct to the one we've signed. It came later, and I'm not fully up to speed with it. But it's basically, it's not seen as replacing the convention, it's seen as improving it. And what it basically does, as we were talking before, is it allows conditions placed on orders. It sort of oils the water as transition goes across. Why we haven't signed it is a mystery to everybody. At the conference, everyone said, why didn't we sign that, including all the government people? And they've been saying that at every conference I've been attending since 1995. I don't know.
Come on, guys.
Apparently it's
Sign
coming.
it.
It's coming.
Yeah. So
There may be something down in the ministry I don't know about, but it's certainly not being debated, at least among the circles I mix in. So maybe higher up the food chain.
So
But
would you say there's a
Probably not.
consensus among Hague Convention lawyers
Absolutely.
that we should sign it?
I don't know
You
anyone
heard
who's said
it here.
opposed to it. So
Okay, awesome.
I think we've done that next
Great.
question.
Yeah, we are. So I was going to say about just on that point is, that bit about the conditions. So if the judge, it kind of makes the convention better, because if there's something that the judge is worried about in the other country, that if you could alleviate it, would mean that it was okay to return, and then suddenly the child's near the other parent as well, then they want to be able to make that order, but they can't make the order.
Exactly.
You can return them, but they're on their
And that's
own.
a really important point about Hague Convention cases, and you see it between different jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions just cannot grasp the fact that we don't care what you think. Larger countries are really bad, without being too rude. The US and the UK are particularly bad.
Right.
So you'll often see orders coming back saying the child's returned to New Zealand. Upon return, mother is to be paid $2,000 a week child support, and dad is to provide a car, and they're going to go on holiday every second year back to the UK. And you think, that's fascinating, Judge. Good luck, But there's no jurisdiction, so thanks for that.
Yeah, right.
And orders, these are to be sealed in New Zealand. We can't seal them in New Zealand.
Yeah. Is that because they've signed the Hague Convention on Parental Responsibility and Protection of Children?
Possibly because they've got a colonial mindset. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's
So-
a of a lecture from a parent, isn't it?
Yeah. It's now quick fire question time. So this one, you have 10 questions with 10 seconds each to answer.
Do I get points? Is there a prize?
We can
You
give
do-
you points.
Yeah, in the court of public opinion, please
Okay.
send us a text if you feel like Alex succeeded in that challenge.
Okay, what is the secret to a good short letter?
Keep it short. With all these conversations, these short letters, I'm baffled by the thing. You just don't write as much. I mean, it's like any lawyer's letter, isn't it? You've got to ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve by this letter? A lot of people. Often you read a lawyer's letter and this is actually not for me, it's for your client. It's like those hilarious relationship property letters, they go on for pages about how great their case is, and you think, I don't just flick to the back to see the number, I just want the number. So just
know
focus
the
on
law.
I don't care what, but also, so it's 150, yes, no? So I think it's focus on what the point is. You're often arguing with clients about it, saying what's the purpose. That said, they are the boss, and sometimes they want to point out that they, their husband ran off with the neighbour and that was really mean, and that's fine if that's what they want to say.
There's a therapeutic purpose.
Yep.
Yeah.
But sometimes therapeutic purposes are better conducted in therapy.
Therapeutic mediums. Yep.
Okay, question 2, not doing so well. What is the best part of your job?
My colleagues and my clients.
Oh.
Yep.
What in a letter from the other side might make you change your mind?
Back with the letters.
That's what we want to learn from you.
Facts I didn't know.
Right.
That's the classic, isn't
Yeah.
it? You may not be aware your client signed the Section 21. No.
Or is in jail right
Watch this
now.
game. Didn't mention this. Yeah.
Would you say your biggest style influence is more Harvey Specter of the TV show Suits or Denny Crane of Boston Legal?
Neither of them.
No, I think not.
Okay.
No.
Okay, this is another letter question. What is the most common, worst letter writing error in your opinion?
To explain the letter writing questions, Alex writes a really good, short, snappy letter, and sometimes that contrasts with some of my letters, and so I'm trying to learn. So this is what this podcast is all about, teaching
It's all
me
about
about
you.
stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
stop talking.
What's it again? I got talked over.
So So basically the biggest error that you see when people write you letters from the other side, what's the absolute worst error?
Why are you writing this? Essentially, what is the purpose of it? You know,
Okay.
and it's like
No obvious purpose.
You know, pages and pages, yet again telling me your client's version of the facts. It's not going to happen.
No.
I mean, unless, as you said before, unless there's something real that I didn't know about, like the jail. Have you ever sent a client to a letter who's called you back in tears saying, "Oh my God, I'm persuaded by this. I've completely changed my view." You know, it just doesn't happen. And then it encourages them to write.
Exactly. Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think Suits star Meghan Markle's real what? This is my favourite question of the whole podcast.
You need to go out more.
Do you think Suits star Meghan Markle's real life experience will make little girls finally dream of being lawyers rather than princesses?
I don't know. I don't know her real life experience. I have no idea.
I hear she's had a hard time of it
Has she?
in the last few
Maybe
years.
lawyer.
Hopefully so.
Maybe lawyers and princesses. I'm
Yeah.
going to be a lawyer first. Okay, what is the question was, what is the best breakup song? But I think you should know. I think it might be dependent on your sex, because I pretty much thrashed any song by Pink for quite a long time, because I think she is a pretty good breakup song. But what's your best breakup song? From a male perspective, say.
I don't have a fish breakup song. I've never thought of it.
You can put it in
What do you mean?
Spotify.
What do you mean?
No, you don't have it. The best.
Put some music on.
Massive Attack. Anything by Massive Attack,
Okay.
actually, yeah.
Good.
What has been your most toe curling experience in legal practice,
My most
apart
what?
from this podcast? Your most toe curling experience.
Embarrassing.
Do you not have toe curling experience?
Well, I mentioned to you before my spectacular performance in the Supreme
water.
Court, where I knocked the
Tell
water
us,
all over
and you
everybody.
might not have told us on air.
I was junioring with one of our colleagues here, and it was the Supreme Court, which is sort of the highest of the high. And I helped with some of the research, but my main job in the Supreme Court was to just sit there still, and I managed to knock the carafe of water over everything within 5 minutes of the judges walking in, so that was spectacular.
You probably made the other lawyers look good, so.
And the last one is once when I was my baby lawyer going to court in Christchurch in the High Court, where I managed to misjudge the distance, got totally drenched in Christchurch rain, walked into the court like a wet rat in a gown, and to find the judge and my opposing counsel discussing how they'd seen their fathers at the golf course that weekend. So that was really inclusive. It was good. And I just sat there and drip, drip, drip. There are many other mistakes, and I'm not going to share those with you.
What is your best trick for cheering yourself up after or during a bad day at work?
Go for a walk.
Not in the rain though.
Not in the
with a
rain.
gown on.
If you could be any lawyer, any particular lawyer, on the day they had a famous win,
Present company accepted, of course.
who would you be, and in what case?
I don't know.
Really?
My friend Vivian.
Justice Goddard and Scott and Williams.
My friend Vivian was the counsel on this one, Robertson Cresswell, Vivian Crawshaw, and that's
Yeah.
a really impressive win. So it would have been nice to be in his shoes when that came out, because it was a turning over. So yeah, that would have been cool. They're the ones that are fun, aren't they? The ones
Well, the
ones you
wins,
think
yeah.
you're not going to
Yeah.
win.
You're right.
But,
Yeah.
And then you change the law.
yeah.
Okay, our last section is called the best question ever. And for you, Alex Ashmore, that question is, what is the secret to doing a good job for your client?
Finding out what they want and checking on that again and again. Just keeping that at the front of your mind, I think. And being honest with them about what you can do. So it's very easy to promise the moon. Someone says, I want blah, 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 and you go, yeah. And then as you walk into court saying, oh, we're not going to win this. So I think, finding out what they want and liaising with them to see if you think it's deliverable. And also other people might be better than you. You might be able to say, I can't deliver that. Try this person. They might be able to. But I think that's the most important thing you can do.
Great.
So.
This has been Divorce Cafe. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you want to look for other episodes, they're online. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all the usual outlets, free outlets. And you can look for the article that is going to go alongside this. You can look at some of Alex's cases and articles that he's got up online. But yeah, join us again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a wrap.
Oh, that was so interesting.
I know,
I
it's
don't know
su- I know, it's such
anything
an
about
interesting
It's really
area,
interesting
right?
jurisprudence. It's
Isn't
really fun.
it?
Yeah, it's really
You
different.
could get. Can you sign off Shelley's CPD?